Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the second session of Transform, our Pride Month event series, where we talk about gender affirming care. In this session, we will explore the latest surgical techniques, best practices, and outcomes in gender affirming surgeries. And we will also examine the pre and post operative care and the ethical considerations involved in providing sensitive care. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Latika Chawla, a gynecologist and minimally invasive surgeon with over 10 years of experience, MRCOG from the UK, and advanced training in robotic surgery. She is known for her inclusive patient first approach, and today she's here to share insights on gender affirming care from a gynecological lens. We're also joined by a trans individual who will be sharing their experience of working with other trans individuals and helping them through their surgical process. As medical students, we should understand the significance of surgical interventions in the comprehensive treatment of gender dysphoria and how it plays a key role in aligning a patient's physical body with their gender identity, thereby helping to improve their psychological well being. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Over to you, Dr. Latika.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to all the organizers at SIMSOC, the organization. And I must actually start by congratulating you, on your Transform series, because it's one of those topics which I feel is very relevant to today's times, but yet very poorly understood. And we are still fighting on a lot of levels, really get awareness on the subject and the surgeries that are involved. So, huge congratulations to all of you. And I hope through today's sessions, we are able to put some light on majorly looking at the surgical things that we do for bottom surgeries. So, I'm just going to try and share my screen. Um, just give me a second. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes, doctor, it's visible.
All right. So basically, the topic that has been assigned to me today is redefining gender through surgery. A little bit about myself. I am a gynecologist and an endoscopic surgeon, mainly practicing advanced pelvic surgeries in Mumbai for the last 14, 15 years now. I am attached to Surya Hospital and Leelavati hospitals, and also attached with a team that basically provides gender care in all forms. So as a part of my team is, a plastic surgeon, a psychiatrist, we have anesthetists, we have a team that looks into all the medical legal aspects of the surgery. So we all sort of come together and, allow, try to create a safe space for these individuals to really come express themselves and get the care they need. We also have a lot of, individuals coming from outside of India for these surgeries. So we help them with, all the pre and the post-op care and recovery and the stay as well in India. So without further ado, let's start and discuss what we really see in an individual when we look at them. Social conditioning in a way is created, or it's been, we have been brainwashed since our childhood that whenever we look at certain characteristics, no matter how aware and woke you are as a person, you will still initially look at it and say and associate it with a certain gender. When we look at long hair, we think it is a female characteristic. When we look at makeup, we think it is female characteristic. When we look at good, biceps or arm muscles, we think of it as a male characteristic. When we look at a beard, we think of it as a male characteristic. So no matter what and how, aware we are, there are certain biases that exist in our society. And through today's talk, initially I would want to address these biases and then discuss majorly the surgical aspects of it. So just to touch a little upon what gender dysphoria truly is, it is actually an incongruence that is felt by an individual. It is experienced by an individual. Where is this incongruence? It is between their assigned gender at birth and their expressed gender. So what is assigned to them at birth in the form of physical characteristics? So if we talk about genitalia, we talk about breast enhancement, breasts, all of those things. Those are the assigned gender. And what they truly feel or experience as an individual is the expressed gender. And when there is discrepancy in these two, it can actually cause very severe distress in these individuals. And that is the thing which is defined as gender dysphoria. It was called initially as a gender identity disorder, but the term has undergone its own evolution to the point of gender dysphoria. So the emphasis here, when we talk about dysphoria, the emphasis is not really on whether how you identify with it. It's not really gender identity, but it is the distress that comes along with not identifying with that gender. So how does one recognize what gender dysphoria is? So recognizing the symptoms is actually the first step in truly understanding and addressing the condition. The symptoms can vary actually significantly. There is no particular age context or cultural context where you will define them by. So it is a strong feeling that can even be in childhood or at a later age where they feel like they don't feel, uh, you know, um, that their body and their mind recognize the same gender. So they feel uncomfortable in their body. So, for example, if there is a male, a male body, but emotionally and mentally, an individual feels like a female, they may be actually very, very uncomfortable with the fact that they don't have breasts. They will be very uncomfortable with hair on their face. They may actually find it very, very uncomfortable to even have a certain voice that is more male like. So they can experience this distress from any of these mentioned areas. They also have a very strong preference. So if I know I am uncomfortable looking like this, I would want to do things. I would want to wear feminine clothes, or try to alter my voice, or wear certain makeup or jewelry to basically make me feel more in congruence with my mind and my emotional sense of gender. It does cause a lot of frustration. It does cause a lot of anxiety. And most of these individuals that we have treated and dealt with do have some sort of anxiety and depression. And that is also because initially this can be extremely confusing for an individual. They don't really know what to make of it. They don't know whether it is a passing phase or it is something that is going to stay with them lifelong. So it is actually an extremely distressing and frustrating situation. There is a strong desire for change. They want to get rid of whatever characteristics they don't identify with, and they want to change into more congruent characteristics, more congruent physical traits. Many a times, in childhood, you will hear, and all of us have heard that, as children, if there was a female child, like for example, for myself, like who identifies as a female, in childhood, you wanted to have a boy cut hair, or, wanted to dress like a boy. Those things are very, very common, which is why these definitions are actually quite confusing initially. But as the child grows up, that is when you start identifying whether it is true dysphoria or not. Related terms are transgender, cisgender, gender non-conforming, gender affirming care. Now, there is a large umbrella which I'm not going to touch upon right now because that can itself take up 1 hour of our talk. But basically, understanding that a cisgender is one that whose identity matches the assigned sex. And if there is a transgender, then it is usually a gender identity that differs from its assigned sex. Okay, and gender affirming care is to support and affirm the genders that one really truly relates to. So it may seem like a one-off thing or something that, is not really seen of or heard of. But actually, if you see that, 0.5 to almost 1.3% of our population identifies as transgender, most of them are going to be closeted. Most of them are right around you, but you don't really know that they, are around you. So there is growing visibility, of course. There is better awareness. There are higher rates of, depression and anxiety, suicidality in transgender population, because as we spoke about it, that one, of course, is the fact that they don't really get the support they need in terms of societal support, in terms of familial support, and they are also dealing with this fight between their mind and body, where they are unable to understand what they truly are. So they really are dealing with quite a lot of things. Coming to the socioeconomic aspects, there is a lot of discrimination and stigma in society. All of us know of that. That is why most of these individuals are closeted, because there is a lot of social exclusion that they face in terms of not getting jobs, in terms of bullying in school, in terms of being thrown out of their own house, their parents not being supportive. So there is a higher incidence of them not getting the correct education they need. Employment issues, homelessness, poverty, financial issues. As I mentioned earlier, there is barrier to education and healthcare as well. Sorry. So they don't really, in fact, recently, if I can give you an example, um, incidentally, the highest number of, trans gender individuals that I have treated in my, years of experience, maximum number of male to female transitions have actually been in medical students. Uh, because one thing is, of course, that they understand things better, I would say. They educate themselves better, and somehow I've realized that they get more parental support than the rest of the population. So I feel like when they are educated as individuals, when the families are educated as parents, their acceptance rate is also very high. But for a child, or say a family who is, from say a lower socioeconomic status, doesn't have a greater understanding of this, the struggle is definitely harder. To get basic education, to get basic healthcare, it is extremely difficult. We had a patient who actually, for over a period of 3 years, used to come to our clinic and keep depositing 1,000 rupees every month, saying that, I'm just collecting money for my surgery because I know that I will not be able to get this kind of money. So she used to collect, she used to work, keep coming to the clinic and keep dropping 1,000 rupees in like a piggy bank, and sort of, getting ready for her surgery. So they do undergo a lot of struggle because they don't get the help they need. Of course, we all know that violence and harassment is also a very big factor in these individuals. They do get harassed, they do get bullied. There is a lot of sexual violence also that they experience, and they are vulnerable as individuals and as marginalized communities in India. Coming to understanding the Indian perspective, there was this very famous NALSA versus Union of India, judgment that was passed by the Supreme Court in 2014, where they actually recognized transgenders as a third gender and said that they do have the right for basic fundamental human rights. And that was pretty landmark. I would still say late, but yes, landmark. In 2019, there was an act, the Transgender Person Protection of Right Act, that was passed again by the Supreme Court of India, which prohibited discrimination against these individuals. Also recognize that if an individual, perceives their gender as male or female, then you have to recognize that gender. And they also, created a provision to provide certification via the district magistrate. So some of our patients actually, after the bottom surgery and, during their hormone replacement therapy, have actually gone ahead with these, certifications, gotten their names changed, both in their passport and their Aadhaar card. So yes, there are provisions available now. It is still a long drawn process and you have to go via the court, but these things are available now. So, like I said, the practical implementation and social acceptance is still, ongoing. That is, I think it is going to be a longer and a more tedious journey for these individuals. But, that's what we are trying to do here. We are trying to create a more safe and a sensitive environment for them to get the help they need. So what is the care, that you need for these individuals? Psychosocial support forms the most important, I would say, cornerstone in terms of care for transgender individuals and female, individuals with gender dysphoria. Now, the issue here is that as a surgeon, I cannot look at this only from a surgery point of view. I cannot look at it and say, the patient comes to my clinic, I do my surgery, I have done my job, I do my follow up, and that's the end of it. No. Your job as a clinician caring in gender care and as a surgeon for gender care is way beyond the surgery. I would say surgery forms possibly the smallest part of what care these individuals need. So psychosocial support is extremely important. Typically, we spend 1 to 1.5 hours in our consultation with these individuals. We encourage them to come with friends, we encourage them to come with family, and we as a unit also try to sit together with them, the plastic surgeon, myself, the gynecologist, we have an anesthetist team, we have our care team, we sit with them, and give them one point of care, one person that they can contact in their times of need. So it is far more than, and a psychiatrist, of course. So it is far more than just providing, surgery. Hormone therapy, again, is the most important thing, and it's possibly the first things that they start. So, especially for a male to female transition, the first thing that they would start is hormone replacement therapy, where they start feeling and looking feminine right from the onset of female or of hormone replacement therapy. So higher doses of estrogen and progesterone sort of helps to compress the testosterone and gives them a little bit of breast buds, will make changes in their voice, will reduce facial hair, and already and have they start growing longer hair, better hair and skin. So all of those feminine characteristics already start coming in with hormonal therapy. Now, one thing which is important to understand is that not every individual with gender dysphoria will want surgery first and will want the entire spectrum of surgery. So, since we understand that this is basically to do with how I feel about my body and my mind and body congruence, it doesn't matter sometimes whether you do a feminization surgery, whether you do a bottom surgery. There are enough transgender individuals that are absolutely okay with just having breasts. Like they don't want to do a bottom surgery, they don't want to do a male to female genital transition, because that is good enough for them to feel good about themselves, to feel confident as individuals, and to lead their life. Not all of them want a sexual function attached to it. So it's a very, very personalized choice what kind of feminization surgeries they would need, or vice versa. So surgical interventions are plenty. Now as the surgical field is also evolving, there are a lot of things that are being done that are new, which I will talk about subsequently. Coming to a multidisciplinary team, I think I have stressed on that enough, that you cannot give care only as an individual. You need a lot of things happening in tandem to give correct care. Now, what kind of surgical options are available? Of course, there are top surgeries. If there is a transmasculine, we do a mastectomy. If there's a transfeminine, we are doing a breast augmentation surgery. There are facial surgeries, so jawline surgeries, certain surgeries that are done for the hairline. There are voice correction surgeries, so more feminine or more masculine voices. So that that is to do with the vocal cords. So there are those change in the position of the vocal cords, slicing of the vocal cords. So those are the kind of surgeries that are done. And then coming to the bottom or genital surgeries. Now, and in fact, recently our team conducted a surgery which was, a feminization surgery, which was clavicular reduction. So if you see men, they would typically have a more broader, shoulder, and females tend to have, a slightly smaller frame. So, there's about a 2 centimeter or 1 inch of clavicle that can be removed on each side to kind of provide, a little bit of, reduction in the torso to give it a more feminine sort of a look. Of course, these are all very specialized surgeries, because if we try to change too much, then the shoulder and the shoulder joint gets affected, the insertion of the muscles get affected, and you can cause long-term issues as well. So all of these things, they are evolving, and as I think the field of gender care is evolving, there is so much more that we can provide to our patients with extreme safety. Coming to a part where I am most commonly involved is the bottom surgeries. The female to male bottom surgeries, of course, is a more, I would say, complex procedure, in the sense that two things we are looking at. It is a multi-stage procedure, of course. One thing we are looking at is creating a phallus, which basically is the penis. And the second thing we are looking at is the functionality of the phallus. So let's come to the first part. Of course, the techniques that we use is a radial forearm free flap, which is the most common used, and the anterolateral thigh flap. So these both flaps are created. These are vascularized flaps. And we create a new phallus or a neophallus construction. The female urethra is a 4 centimeter urethra, and the male urethra is about 3 times the size, if not more. So that is what we need to create an excessive urethral length and lengthen this urethra. Also, glanceplasty, that is basically constructing the erectile organ. This is the toughest part actually in the phalloplasty surgery, and it is very difficult to create the sensation in the glans, which is why usually they do require an erectile prosthesis implantation at possibly a later stage or a second stage, third stage surgery. And these implants, basically can help them a little bit with the erectile function of the phallus. Okay, so this is the component where we do phalloplasty. This is a more complex procedure because we want vascularity, we want the urethral enlargement, we want the nerves to function, and then eventually the erectile prosthesis. Now, please understand, like I did mention earlier, that not everybody wants a sexual function. So if there's a female to male who just wants the external genitalia to look male, and they don't really want a male function at that point, then the sexual function, then only creating a neophallus is good enough for them. So depending, it needs to be customized depending on what the individual truly wants. The second surgery is metoidioplasty. Metoidioplasty is nothing but, just sort of a more conservative form of, the entire neophallus surgery. Now, this is because we are anyways giving hormone replacement therapies to these individuals. So the hormones itself will enlarge the clitoris. Now, if you remember, when we talk about, higher levels of testosterone since childhood, we have ambiguous genitalia, or something we call as a enlarged clitoris, or giant clitoris. So those are the things that basically, we can use and modify a bit to form like a neophallus. It is definitely less complex than a phalloplasty. It is limited length, but the good part of this is that it preserves erotic sensation, because we are not really damaging anything in that area, and the clitoris, stimulation of the clitoris will still give erotic sensation. Of course, whether we're talking about penetration or not is very, very individual. It's a very tiny neophallus that is created, by this technique, and usually it will not, give you penetrative pleasure as a normal penile, a normal penis would. Now coming to the male to female bottom surgery. Now this is the part I'm going to really talk about in detail, because that is what I do. So the vaginoplasty is basically what we are doing. We are creating an external genitalia which looks female, and we are creating a vagina as well. So function, depth, as well as aesthetics. So there are different techniques that are available. There's something called as a penile inversion vaginoplasty, where they basically take penile tissue and they just, we're just creating a sort of a neo vagina, like we create in, say, a patient who has MRKH syndrome. So this is similar kind of a concept where we're creating a neo vagina and we're just using penile tissue to line it. Second is a sigmoid colon vaginoplasty, when the tissue outside is inadequate, because like I said, these patients are on HRT. So if they are, having a very small penis and a very small scrotal tissue, then we're not able to create a lot only with penile inversion. So we use a part of the sigmoid colon that is shut off from the entire colon. So we take a graft from there, and we use those tissues as vaginoplasty. And the third one is the peritoneal vaginoplasty, where we use peritoneal grafts to line the vagina, which is newly created. Addition to that, we are going to create a clitoris. We are going to create, the vulval tissue, the labia minora, labia majora, and also preserve the sensation through the neurovascular bundle that is present in the penis and place it in such a way that it kind of resembles the clitoris. So this is the homologues that we look at. So the scrotal tissue usually would become your external labia minora and labia majora. The glans penis forms the sensitile or erotic area of the glans, a clitoris. And of course, the prepuce or the foreskin is used to create a hood over the clitoris. Now, one thing we need to understand here is that in what cases you will use what. So penile inversion usually is the simplest surgery. So if the patient tells you that I just need like a small vagina, I don't need depth, I don't want to do too much, but I just want to get rid of my external genitalia, then penile inversion possibly is the easiest surgery as far as surgical technique is concerned, anesthesia risk is concerned, and if they don't want any significant vaginal function. Coming to sigmoid vaginoplasty can give you better depth. But the problem with sigmoid vaginoplasty is that sometimes, because it is the sigmoid, and it has its own functionality, patients do complain of, a foul smell. And the largest, vaginal depth that you can give them is possibly about 4 or 5 inches maximally with sigmoid vaginoplasty. The third and the most important one, and the one that, in fact, our team has created as a new technique and is in the process of publication, is the total peritoneal pull-through vaginoplasty. So we are using the peritoneum. And why are we using the peritoneum? Now, the peritoneum is a moist, expansible structure, and you can it is you have such a large quantity of peritoneum that you can create a very large, expansible, structure. You don't have to struggle with space, or you don't have to struggle with, how much area, how much tissue I will get as a graft. It is non-hairy, it is non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. The innate functions of absorption, secretion, and defense mechanisms are like those of a normal vaginal mucosa, which is why the most satisfying sexual experience that a patient gets is through the peritoneal grafts. So if a patient comes to you and tells you that I want a proper vaginal function, then this is the go-to technique. So what we do is we create a single pedicle flap. So there is a lot of use of peritoneum in literature, where they are basically, harvesting peritoneum through a laparoscopic approach like we do. So they're just going to dissect the peritoneum, create like a flap, and then come out via your groin and use that flap in order to sort of line the vaginal cavity, which is newly created from below. But what we do is we completely do this intraperitoneal. So I'm going to show you a tiny video. I hope you're able to understand, what we do from it. But when we are doing completely intraperitoneal, what we need to understand that the peritoneum, along with its blood supply, which can be from multiple arteries, really goes through and lines the cavity nicely. Plus, in this case, what we are doing is we are actually creating a complete neovagina, which transverses the pelvic floor. So if this is the pelvic floor, usually a neovagina is going to be under it. But what we are doing here is creating a gap in the pelvic floor. We are lifting the neovaginal apex till inside intra-abdomen, from where we are pulling the peritoneum outside through it. So it's a through and through cavity that is being created and then covered on top to create a neo-apex of the vaginal canal. So it gives us a long length. So an average length post-op immediate would be 8 to 9 inches. Why do we need an 8 to 9 inch length? Because no matter what technique you do to create a neovagina, because it is not a natural space, general constriction of that area does occur, no matter what technique you use. So if I have an 8-inch cavity and I'm trying to, and the constriction does happen, it will still go down to at least a 6 or a 7-inch cavity. Okay, so that is where the advantage of peritoneum comes in, and this technique comes in. And of course, we are able to give you better aesthetics, because whenever we get a graft outside in the abdomen, we actually leave them, with a big 7 centimeter scar on the groin. So you will be able to identify that as a groin surgery. But in this technique that we use, there are no groin scars. So I'm going to actually show you a tiny video. And since you're medical students, I thought you might be interested in it. So this is an intra-abdominal view. And as you very well see, this is the umbilicus. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to start harvesting, the peritoneum through the umbilicus. How do I decide where do I start? So usually depending upon the torso of the individual, and we judge as to what length of peritoneum we will need, and 2 to 3 centimeters above of that is where I'm going to start taking the incision. Now, if you see here, we are actually under the plane of the obliterated ligaments. Why is that? Because we don't want to go ahead of the bladder. We don't want to go into the space of Retzius. We actually want to go behind the bladder completely, behind the bladder dome. So I'm harvesting the peritoneum, and in areas, I'm actually trying to use the scissor because I want to preserve vascularity. If you see the thinness of the layer, the peritoneum is actually quite thin. So this dissection needs to be extremely meticulous. And as far as possible, we leave as much vascularity, because that is what is going to decide the outcome. If the graft is not vascular, it is just going to necrose and it is going to fall off. So I need to make sure that the vascularity is very well maintained. And we kind of go in a dome sort of fashion. So starting from the umbilicus to each side and down. Usually this dissection in this plane is absolutely fine. We are not looking at any major structures. The obliterated umbilical ligaments form as a marker. And when as we go down and as we keep going lower down, we are going to start seeing important structures on both sides. So bilaterally, we are going to start seeing, vas deferens. We're going to start seeing your ureters. We're going to start seeing your iliac vessels. So if you see here, towards the right side, we are now looking at the bladder dome in the center, and on both sides, we are now beginning to see the vasculature. Okay, so can you see on the left side here, there is the internal iliacs, and we are going down further here on the right-hand side. This dissection needs to be extremely meticulous because we are around important structures, and you see this kind of flap has already been lifted. And here is the ureter. So we always want to sit and mark the ureters first. We want to see where they are going. Okay, so that I know that I'm on the correct track. Okay. So the initial few times when we did this procedure, it was tougher because, we were kind of getting used to where the ureters are, where the iliac vessels are. And because you're going all the way to the pelvic floor, the ureters tend to converge in the center, right? So here you can see that we are just judging exactly how lower down we need to go. The instrument on my left is actually pulling up the bladder. So this is all the bladder that is being lifted up, and the peritoneum I am cutting off the bladder and I'm going behind the bladder. So right now here we are not looking at any important structures, and we need to go down all the way. Can you see? So all this on the top is actually the bladder, and where my instrument is the plane between the peritoneum and the bladder posteriorly. I'm going to go lower down till the point where I see the pelvic floor. So this is a point where I've reached the pelvic floor, and I'm creating a muscle cutting incision. My plastic surgeon colleague from down below, who's created a new cavity, is actually inserting a sponge on holder. After I've made a muscle cutting incision, we are splitting it by blunt dissection and putting in a dilator, which basically is something that we've created. It is a silicone dilator. And then we are loading this peritoneum and pushing it down into the cavity. And this is what we see from the top. So this, once the peritoneum goes down completely, I am basically receiving the urethra from below. So the male urethra is a longer urethra. So we actually utilize that. So once we cut it into the 4 centimeter that the female needs, we actually open it up and we invert it and we send it inside the peritoneal cavity. and use that along with the side, peritoneal edges to create a neo apex. So this is a silicone mold that then we leave inside for the first 48 hours. And silicone, because it is an inert material, we don't want any infections happening in this area. So we suture and we create an apex like this above inside the peritoneum. So you see till where the silicone mold is, and I'm going slowly running around it and creating an apex in this fashion. So once the neovagina, so I'm just going to go a little ahead. I don't know why this video slowed down. Yeah, so once the neovagina is created, it basically looks like this. We don't really need to, so initial days, we used to keep, adhesion barriers and, things like Inter-C, that is oxidized regenerated cellulose. Those are the things that prevent adhesions. We used to think that because we've bared so much area of the peritoneum, the bowel is going to go and get stuck everywhere. But it usually doesn't happen. That is the beauty of the peritoneum, because whatever peritoneal edges are left, they actually grow, towards each other. And when we've had 1 second look surgery, unfortunately, I don't have the recording for that, otherwise I would have showed you. But the peritoneum nicely forms completely over it. So nothing else is required. The only thing is that we need to give them very good pain relief in these patients. And this I have kept for you. This is a 21-day follow-up that, we did for this patient. We actually did a hysteroscopy, or like a scopy in the neovagina, vaginoscopy. And we saw that the tissue was building up really nicely. So you see that it is a well vascularized tissue. It has these crevices just like a normal vagina would. So it actually, when we took biopsies and we sent it for histopathology, actually turned out to be stratified squamous epithelium. That is the beauty of nature, that the peritoneum actually gets converted into a stratified squamous epithelium with constant dilatation and with maintained vascularity. The recovery after bottom surgery is actually possibly one of the most important things that I want to discuss in today's lecture. What we are understanding with more and more surgeries that we do is the pre-operative period is the most important period, because it may just look like, oh, we took out a penis and we put in a vagina, but that's not how it works. We are trying to create space in a space that does not exist. We are trying to create tissue in an organ that does not exist. And when we are trying to do that, we need to make sure that we are dilating, very, very well post-surgery. One of the most important, I would say, and the reason I wrote dilatation in capital and hiccups after that, is that we have faced a lot of issues when it comes to post-op dilatation. What I understood as we did more and more surgeries was that patients find it very difficult to dilate. They don't understand the concept of dilatation. Now, when females after an MRKH or a vaginoplasty procedure are actually dilating, they know they have a broader pelvis. We have not taken any muscle cutting incisions. So we are actually, not creating any new areas inside the levator ani muscle. The cavity or the pelvis of a female is gynecoid, so it's a broader pelvis and females find it easier to dilate. As against that, when you're doing a male to female transition, bottom surgery, the pelvises are very, very narrow. So they are android pelvises. Secondly, they have a stronger muscle floor, right? Because the males by birth will have a stronger muscle floor, pelvic muscle floor than a female do. Why? Because the female have more exits in the pelvic floor than a male does. So we do have a stronger pelvic floor, which is why pelvic floor relaxation followed by dilatation actually becomes very problematic. So we have tried things like diazepam pessaries, and now we were actually at some point thinking of even trying Botox to relax those muscles, because they actually go into a sense of spasm and dilatation becomes a big problem. So what we have started doing now actually is pre-operative pelvic floor relaxation exercises. So I have a PDF that I share with my patients where they are, doing these dilatations almost 2 to 3 hours prior to 2 to 3 months prior to when we are planning surgery. So that post-surgery, when you're dealing with pain and a lot of psychological changes, they don't have to think about what relaxation is. They have already practiced for 3 months, they know what relaxation is, and they will be able to, dilate better. Plus, we do regular follow-ups. We do tell them that you need to come to us, let us teach you how to dilate. There are a lot of dilatations that are supervised dilatations post-op that are done for them. Pelvic floor physiotherapy, like I mentioned, is one of the most important things, both pre and post-op, that are extremely important. Continuous dilatation is possibly the cornerstone of a good outcome for these peritoneal surgeries, because any kind of vaginoplasty you do, if the patient is unable to do post-op dilatation regularly, then the cavity is going to collapse. This is very similar to our concept of MRKH surgeries when we do in females, who are born with no vaginal, which are born with absent vagina. We always time these surgeries, around their marriage, because we say that, you need to dilate, you need to have regular intercourse. Only then the vagina will stay open, otherwise it will collapse. So in a 90-day follow-up, if you look at this external genitalium and you see there is hardly any scar, there are only laparoscopic scars, which could actually be easily explained by any other, laparoscopic surgery. These individuals don't have to explain their scars, and they look like a normal external genitalia of a female. And if you see this, the kind of vaginal length, the pubic symphysis is a mark of your pelvic floor on this MRI, and you see the kind of vaginal length we have achieved with this technique. So in our experience, we've done about 53 patients so far, spanning through 2017 to 2023. I've not added the last 2 years. Apologies, I did not have the bandwidth, but I think we could have possibly crossed another 10, 12 procedures there. But the typical age has been between 24. In fact, we had a patient who was 57-year-old from Australia who had an entire family, children, and at this point decided, that they wanted to, she wanted to really experience her life the way she had thought she is. So the family supported, her wife supported, children supported, and she came all the way from Australia for this surgery at the age of 57. So we do have patients from all age groups that come in. One thing we need to understand, these are long surgeries. The average duration of stay of the surgery are 6 to 8 hours. We have been able to kind of streamline a lot of factors like anesthesia, time, epidural, a lot of small nuances to sort of bring together and reduce the surgery times. But I still would say that a minimum of 6 to 8 hours is what we definitely take to do these surgeries. The cavity length achieved is about 6 to 8 inches. Loss of cavity length that I mentioned, failure of post-op dilatation was possibly the highest reason why this happened. A labia minora, dehiscence, and second stage procedures are required most of the time in these patients, because we need to understand that there are a lot of factors. The patients need to be taking their HRT well. Most of them, if they are smokers or nutritionally deficient, then those are the ones, or anemic, then it does affect your surgery outcomes. A little bit of stuffing is very, very common. I would say almost in 9 out of 10 surgeries. So a little bit of second stage correction, if we want to enhance the external picture, is usually done in these cases. So complications are, yes, we are trying to change anatomy very significantly. So things like strictures, urethral fistulae, infections, partial tissue necrosis, all of these things we do see, as I showed you in the complication chart, which is why preoperative counseling is extremely important. And you'll see these individuals, I've developed so much respect for them over my journey in gender care, because I feel when you interact with them, when you interact with their support groups, you feel like your problems are so small. Just imagine somebody willing to go this kind of a surgery. Just imagine the kind of mental agony they are in, that they are ready to do no matter what it takes, no matter what complications it takes, to be just what they think is themselves. In general gynecology practice, patients are not very happy to take complications. Trust me, a little bit of extra bleeding, or an infection they come back with, a wound infection, they literally are on cutthroat terms, and they're like very, very upset about it. But I have noticed the most calm, the most patient, the most resilient individuals in transgender care And I really feel like they have seen the worst of life, which is why they are full of gratitude. So there are a lot of complications, and you need to discuss with them in details. We have pages and pages of information that are given to them, and that they sign and they undersign, that they understand, because this is not an easy procedure to go through. Another thing that I want to talk about is that whenever they undergo these kind of surgeries, from the surgeon point of view, we do get two psychiatric opinions before we actually perform these surgeries, because these are permanent surgeries. If I talk about a breast enhancement, or if I've put in some implants, the implants can still be removed. But can a bottom surgery be reversed? No. So these actually, we need to make sure we're dealing only and only with gender dysphoria. So we have psychiatrists in our team, where they do, according to the DSM criteria and the legal criteria in our country, they will define them as gender dysphoria, and they will define that this change in surgery, I mean this gender reaffirming surgery, may actually be helpful for their mental state. So we do have those things that come in as well. Apart from, of course, our general pre-anesthesia checkups, extensive consent forms. Those are the prerequisites that we follow very, very strictly. So mental health evaluation and support, like I just mentioned, extremely important. They are already on HRT, and they usually, when they come to us for bottom surgery, so monitoring HRT, because if you do understand that HRT also is a thromboembolic condition, so we make sure that it increases the incidence of thromboembolic episodes. And these are long surgeries, so we are giving them thromboprophylaxis pre-post surgery as well. And of course, we are talking about a long term care. So just last week, I met a patient that we have operated 6 years back. She was one of the first few patients that we've operated, and she just got through her NEET exam. She was an MBBS student at the time, and you know undergoing transition is not easy. So post her MBBS, she really did, give it a few years where she wanted to get everything else in place, complete her transition, get her, name changed, all of that, because she said, I'm not entering into post graduation with my old name. So she just came last week. She flew down from Chandigarh, and it was just the best experience sitting with her. I had nothing checkup wise to do for her, but for 1 whole hour, we had a consultation. So these people do need that long term care. And as a care team, it is a lifelong care that you need to give them. So, in a nutshell, gender dysphoria is distress from gender, and it needs gender congruence. That is what you're giving to them. We are dealing with a population that is not treated well. They're not even looked as individuals. You have to have sensitivity towards them. We have good Indian law now, and it is supportive, but of course we know that we have challenges. Their surgeries, whatever kind of surgery they do, does improve the quality of life, and bottom surgery is extremely complex amongst all the other surgeries that they do, and that's why it requires an expert care team. So, last but not the least, we really do need to change the lens with which we view the world. There is no correct way to view the world. Each of these pictures has its own beauty. It is the same picture, and one may argue and say that the first picture is the one which is the most natural colors, but then who defines that that color is natural? Similarly, who defines that, an individual needs to feel a certain way? We need to respect them, we need to understand where they come from, and we need to be sensitive towards them. So, with this, I think I end my talk. I'll be happy to take any kind of questions that you may have.
So the first question we have is what are the long-term effects of treatment?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you well. Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, I think I lost my connection for a bit. Yes, sorry. You were saying?
The first question is, what are the long-term effects on urinary health and what can we do to preserve it?
Yeah, so typically with these bottom surgeries, like I said, one thing is we are changing the urethra, the natural urethral path, plus the angulation of the urethra and the vagina is different in these individuals post surgery. So yes, there is a risk of recurrent urinary tract infections. Uh, Basically, in the first few months, we teach them, we talk about bladder training, where we make sure that they're drinking enough water. We're ruling out all the common causes that lead to urinary tract infection. And of course, during surgery, we make sure that because they also require prolonged catheterization. So we do give them long-term antibiotics. We make sure that they have more alkaline urine. So we do give them urine alkalinizers. And, eventually with time, once the anatomy settles down, the risk of recurrent UTI comes down. But we need to make sure that for that period, which is usually between 3 to 6 months, we're extremely careful about, providing and giving them correct education about caring. So when they dilate also, the dilators need to be sterilized, they need to clean the area very nicely. So all of those instructions are given by the team so that they can reduce the risk of UTIs in these patients.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is, as you said, given that most gender surgeries are permanent, what support do you offer patients who experience regret or consider detransitioning?
So honestly, we have not yet come across a single patient that we've done in my experience that has come back with a regret. But in the preoperative counseling, there is a whole, a whole document on surgery-related regret. Unfortunately, the management of this is mostly done by our psychiatrists. There's not much that, one can do from the physical point of it. We cannot the see once we have done a bottom surgery, to be honest, sometimes patients come with a penile vaginoplasty that has been done and they want us to do a redo. Even those surgeries are extremely complicated with a very, very high complication rate and damage to the surrounding structure. So uh, if they do come back, I think my first approach would be more based on getting the mental health help. From the surgical point of view, there is actually very little we can do. Very little.
Ma'am, and a follow-up question to this is, with developments in regenerative medicine and tissue engineering, do you see a future where gender-affirming surgeries become less invasive and fully reversible?
Um, it's a very interesting question. And not that it has not crossed our minds, but one thing we need to understand is, maybe when we are talking about a female to male, maybe that is something that, definitely would benefit because creating, a neo phallus in a lab and, just sort of finding ways to connect and disconnect it, definitely. But having a creating a vagina is a completely different ballgame altogether. You actually are making structural changes. So yes, when we do a male to female surgery, the changes we will see with regenerative medicine will most likely be, not having to do an extensive peritoneal dissection. Maybe we will be able to create tissues in laboratories which we can use to line this area. We could be creating tissues, similar to the labia minora, majora, and using, those to transplant. But what I'm getting at is a phallus once removed, it will be very difficult to get that back on. So a female to male transition surgery, definitely, possibly we will be looking at a reversibility, possibility of reversibility, but not really the other way around.
Thank you, ma'am. And the last question we have is, what drew you into this niche field of surgery?
Sorry, what?
What drew you into this field of surgery?
Uh, well, to be honest, I think it called me more than me calling it. Uh, the team I work with, and we actually, a couple of them are my childhood friends. One of them is a very close friend, the plastic surgeon, Dr. Umang Kothari. And if you go on his page, you'll be able to see a lot more about gender care because he does the majority of the feminization surgeries. But basically, so he got in touch with me where he said that, I'm working with a team where we're trying to do these surgeries. Would you be interested, in joining the team and, understanding this? Now, the reason I chose this is because I am a very mental health friendly individual myself. I would like to call myself as a woke individual. In my family, in my surroundings, I'm possibly the one person who one can call the black sheep. I have always tried to speak my mind, to work, with individuals that, are similar with my kind of, are more sensitive and similar to my kind of thinking. I do believe that each and every person, on this planet has the right to live respectfully and the right to do with their body whatever the hell they want. They don't need to explain. They don't need to, take permissions. They don't need to beg for basic, rights and basic respect. So I do feel very strongly about the subject. And of course, my evolution happened even more so because of my curiosity. So when the first time I met the first transgender through this surgical thing, and there was so much. I think the first time I met, Sukhi is her name. So I met Sukhi. I think I took for 3 hours. I was sitting with Sukhi, and I had the best conversation of my life, I think, with her. And, just understanding the perspective that you've never really seen and heard from people, whatever, unless and until you interact with them, you will not really know what truly they go through. And I think that is where my true journey of evolution started. And, I would not like to think of myself as a person who's helped them. Truly, they have helped me. So yeah, that's, I think, how it really truly happened. And then, seeing them come back, seeing them smile, interacting with them, I think that truly gave me a lot of work satisfaction as well. So yeah, that was my journey.
Thank you so much, Dr. Latika, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today. Your insights into the surgical techniques, the patient care, and the ethical considerations involved in gender-affirming surgeries were incredibly valuable, and we truly appreciate your time and expertise.
You're most welcome. And I hope, all the people who've participated today, if they can just take home this message that we need to be a little more sensitive towards our fellow people, I would say, not even like, male, female, all of that, everybody's following their journey, everybody's going through their, things. So unless we are in their shoes, I think we should not really judge them or criticize them, and just try and be a little warm and kind towards everyone. So I hope that you've understood something about this. I'm very happy to, answer any other doubts that may arise on a subsequent occasion. And all the very best to all of you upcoming doctors. You are the ones who are going to change the way India sees medicine. You're the ones who are going to bring new things and, evolve the medical training and teaching and, practice in India. So all the very best. I think we need more talks like these. And so good job, Simsog. I think I'm extremely happy to be a part of this. So congratulations and see you soon at another time.
Thank you so much again, Dr. Latika.
Most
Up
welcome.
next, we have Kamlesh, a really proud trans individual who runs their own NGO called Trans Galaxy up in Noida. And they're here to talk about the transgender community's experience with gender reconstruction surgery and their overall experience with the medical community in India.
Hi, Kamlesh. How are you? I can't hear you.
Could you please unmute yourself?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. I'm audible.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, sorry. Good evening, everyone. My name Kamlesh. My pronouns is she and her. I'm founder of Trans Galaxy Foundation. This foundation is the working for the transgender individual for their betterment, and our main objective is to create the more inclusive environment for the transgender individual in India. And this group is mostly the trans professionals. We all are the member of our NGO is trans professional who are already working in somewhere some good positions. So next, before to start my presentation, today my topic given by you is challenges faced by the trans community during the medical facilities. So much positive things in India for the trans community that last few years. One is the medical developments, a lot of good surgeon available in India. Even after Thailand, India is the second larger country where the gender affirmative surgery done carry out, even very economic cheapest rate in comparison to the world or good results. So these are the some positive things related to our transitioning condition medical facility available in India. But in spite of these things, biggest challenge faced by the community because of lack of facility available and lack of good surgeons, and their numbers is very limited. Only the metropolitan cities they available. So before to start, I just want highlight the transgenders terms. Transgender, as Dr. Letika explained very well, all things related to us, including our problems, our day-to-day challenges faced by the trans community. So I am just touch on all it, and most transgenders is the person who body not match their biology and identity, especially discomfortable of the gender's identity. एंड एज पर लीगल टर्म्स मोस्टली अगर हम ट्रांसजेंडर्स की बात करें तो लोग ट्रांसजेंडर्स की हम एक इमेज सोच लेते हैं कि ट्रांसजेंडर पर्सन ऐसे होंगे कि मस्कुलर बॉडी होगी और मेकअप किए होंगे और एक साड़ी पहने होंगे, तो ऐसे लोगों को ही लोग ट्रांसजेंडर समझते हैं। तो बट ऐसा नहीं है। ट्रांसजेंडर्स एज पर लीगल जो टर्मिनोलॉजी है या एज पर एक्ट जो उसमें जो कंसीडर किए जाते हैं वो ट्रांसजेंडर एक अम्ब्रेला टर्म है जिसमें ट्रांस मैन, ट्रांस वुमेन, पर्सन विद इंटरसेक्स वेरिएशन और जेंडर क्वेयर पर्सन्स, person with social culture identity such as Kinnar, Hijra, Aravalli, and Jogappa, all are come under the word of transgenders. Okay, and already Madam explained dysphoria. In terms of medical science, transgenders and their transitioning are covered under the medical gender disorder earlier, but now then this gender dysphoria and now gender incongruence. The correct word for us is gender incongruence. Next, transitioning. तो transitioning बहुत ही सिंपल वर्ड है, मेल टू फीमेल, फीमेल टू मेल कन्वर्ट करना या ट्रांसफॉर्म करना, बट फॉर अस इट्स द बिगेस्ट थिंग्स आवर लाइफ बिकॉज विदाउट ट्रांजिशनिंग डिस्फोरिया कैन नॉट बी मैनेज। डिस्फोरिया अंटिल अनलेस यू डिड ट्रांजिशनिंग तभी वो शांत होता है, तभी आपको वो फीलिंग्स और इमोशनली मेंटली आपको वो सेटिस्फेक्शन मिलता है। अंटिल अनलेस जब तक आपके पास ये चीजें नहीं आप ट्रांसफॉर्म कर पाते हैं तो जो सिस लोग हैं उनके लिए बॉडी बहुत ही टेकन ग्रांटेड है, उनको तो गिफ्ट में मिली है, जैसा वो चाहते थे वैसे मिले। बट हमारे लिए जो हमारी बॉडी है वो हमने अर्न की है, वो अर्न करने के लिए हमने बहुत कुछ खोया है, जैसे कि लव वंस को खोते हैं, पावर खोते हैं, रिस्पेक्ट खोते हैं, फैमिली खोते हैं। बहुत सारे लोग हैं जो अभी भी इन सारी चीजों को अपनी ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन पूरी करने के लिए अपने सब कुछ दांव पे लगा देते हैं, अपने आप से फाइट करते हैं सारी चीजों को। स्पेशली सबसे पहली जो फाइट है आपको वो है अपने से, क्योंकि ये सारे स्टिग्मा, सोशल टेम्पो और सब कुछ आपको खुद ही एक्सेप्ट करना है। अपना फैमिली प्रेशर, खुद का प्रेशर, सोसाइटी प्रेशर, सिस्टम का प्रेशर, तो उन सब से लड़ते हुए बहुत ही कम लोग हैं जो ट्रांजिशनिंग कर पाते हैं या ट्रांजिशनिंग करते हैं, और बाकी लोग या तो कहीं ना कहीं अपने फीलिंग्स को कंप्रोमाइज कर लेते हैं, या जो कंप्रोमाइज नहीं कर सकते हैं तो वो एंड ऑफ, अगर फैमिली एक्सेप्ट नहीं करती है, सोसाइटी एक्सेप्ट नहीं करती है, तो फाइनली एंड ऑफ रिजल्ट क्या होगा, ये घर छोड़ देंगे। तो बहुत घर भी कुछ ही लोग छोड़ पाते हैं, तो बहुत कुछ लोग अभी भी इतना कुछ सेंसिटिव होने के बाद भी, लीगल रिफॉर्म आने के बावजूद भी, बहुत सारे ट्रांस इंडिविजुअल अभी भी सुसाइड कर लेते हैं या डिप्रेशन का शिकार हो जाते हैं जाने अनजाने में। क्योंकि ये जितनी भी अवेयरनेस है, ये सिर्फ बड़े शहरों में, मेट्रोपॉलिटन सिटी में तो अभी भी लोग सेंसिटिव हैं, पेरेंट्स चीज़ों को समझने लगे हैं, बट अभी भी रूरल एरिया में, जहाँ अभी भी हमारी 70% पॉपुलेशन तो रूरल एरिया में रहती है, तो वहाँ तो जो बच्चे पढ़े लिखे नहीं हैं, जहाँ डॉक्टर्स अवेयर नहीं है, जहाँ सिस्टम अवेयर नहीं है, जहाँ पर ही, तो वहाँ पर ही अभी भी वो सारी प्रॉब्लम्स फेस कर रहे हैं जो 15-20 साल पहले बड़े शहरों में लोग फेस करते थे। नेक्स्ट, ट्रांजिशनिंग के 3 पार्ट होते हैं। अगर कोई भी मेडिकल ट्रांजिशनिंग करता है ट्रांस इंडिविजुअल, तो पहला है सोशल ट्रांजिशनिंग, लीगल ट्रांजिशनिंग एंड मेडिकल ट्रांजिशनिंग। सोशल ट्रांजिशनिंग खुद की लड़ाई है, अपने आप से एक्सेप्टेंस सबसे बड़ा बिगेस्ट, सबसे पहला जो स्टेप है वो है खुद को एक्सेप्ट करना। अगर आप खुद से एक्सेप्ट कर लेते हैं तो आधी लड़ाई आप खुद ही जीत जाते हैं उस दिन, क्योंकि आपकी खुद से लड़ाई जो है, वो सारे जो मेंटल सोसाइटी इशू हैं वो सबसे ज्यादा हैवी आपके खुद पे होते हैं। तो अगर आप खुद से एक्सेप्ट कर लेते हैं अपने रियल आइडेंटिटी को, तो उसके बाद में आप वो कम आउट करते हैं। कम आउट का कोई थंब रूल नहीं है, सबका अपना प्रोसेस है। कोई मेडिकल ट्रीटमेंट के बाद कम आउट करता है, कोई पहले ही कर लेता है, तो ये इसका कोई थंब रूल नहीं है। सबका अपनी इंडिविजुअल जर्नी है, इंडिविजुअल एफर्ट है। फैमिली को भी कन्विंस करना सबका अलग तरीका है, बट मैं गाइड सबको यही करती हूँ कि जितना हो सके उतना आप कोशिश करिए, फैमिली को नहीं छोड़ना है, फैमिली को कन्विंस करने की कोशिश करिए कि वो आपको समझें, आपको जाने। और वो एक और अच्छा तरीका है कि पहले आप एज ए बीइंग ए पर्सन अच्छे बनिए, आप अपनी फैमिली के लिए कुछ अचीवमेंट करिए, अपने लिए काम करिए, अपनी एजुकेशन पूरी करिए और फाइनेंशियली इंडिपेंडेंट हुई, फिर जाके आप फैमिली को कन्विंस कर पाएंगे। अगर आप कुछ नहीं करते हैं, पढ़ाई भी नहीं की है और आप फाइनेंशियली कुछ नहीं कर रहे हैं, तो कैरियर में भी कुछ नहीं किया है, तो आपकी फैमिली उतनी सपोर्टिव नहीं होगी जितनी एक सक्सेसफुल पर्सन की होती है। लीगल ट्रांजिशनिंग में एज पर एक्ट, हमारे देश में एक एक्ट पारित हुआ था ट्रांसजेंडर्स कम्युनिटी के लिए, उसका नाम है ट्रांसजेंडर पर्सन प्रोटेक्शन राइट एक्ट 2019, जिसके थ्रू अभी जो भी ट्रांसजेंडर्स लोग हैं उनको अपने आप को एक टीजी सर्टिफिकेट लेना होता है। वो नेशनल पोर्टल है और ऑनलाइन प्रोसेस है, आपको उस पर अप्लाई करना पड़ता है। तो पहला स्टेप लीगल ट्रांजिशनिंग का है, आपको टीजी कार्ड लेना है। जब आप टीजी कार्ड ले लेते हैं, फिर टीजी कार्ड के भी 2 स्टेप होते हैं। एक टीजी कार्ड जिसमें आपका जेंडर ट्रांसजेंडर मेंशन रहता है। अगर कोई बाइनरी का हिस्सा बनना चाहता है, ट्रांसजेंडर्स मेल या ट्रांस मैन या ट्रांस वुमेन, जो अपनी लीगल आइडेंटिटी में मेल या फीमेल करने चाहते हैं, तो वो रिवाइज टीजी सर्टिफिकेट के लिए अप्लाई करेंगे। रिवाइज टीजी सर्टिफिकेट में आपको मेडिकल इंटरवेंशन रिक्वायर्ड होती है, जिसमें आपका कोई भी जेंडर एफॉर्मेटिव रिलेटेड सर्जरी, अगर आपने कुछ भी लिया है रिलेटेड टू योर जेंडर एफॉर्मेशन, तो वो सब कुछ कंसीडर किया जा सकता है। तो कोई भी एक सर्टिफिकेट लगा के आप उसको रिवाइज टीजी सर्टिफिकेट ले सकते हैं, जिसपे आपका जेंडर जो है मेल या फीमेल मेंशन रहेगा। उसके बाद में आप जो भी डॉक्यूमेंट हैं, जहाँ भी जेंडर मार्कर्स हैं, वो 1 बाय 1 करके आप चेंज करा सकते हैं। तीसरा जो सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट आता है वो है मेडिकल ट्रांजिशनिंग, क्योंकि जितने भी ट्रांसजेंडर पर्सन हैं सभी चाहते हैं कि उनकी बॉडी उनकी रियल आइडेंटिटी के अकॉर्डिंग हो। तो उसके लिए वो मेडिकल प्रोसीजर के थ्रू गुजरते हैं। उसके बहुत सारे प्रॉब्लम्स फेस करना पड़ती हैं। वो मेंटली प्रॉब्लम्स हो सकती हैं, फाइनेंशियल प्रॉब्लम हो सकती हैं, और सपोर्टिव प्रॉब्लम्स हो सकती हैं। आफ्टर सर्जरी केयर की दिक्कत आती है। तो नेक्स्ट, जेंडर अफर्मेटिव सर्जरी मेल टू फीमेल में हमने ऑलरेडी बहुत डिटेल में कवर किया था। मैं सिर्फ एक समरी हाईलाइट कर रही हूँ कि अगर कोई मेल टू फीमेल ट्रांजिशनिंग करता है तो उसको ये सारी कॉमन सर्जरियां रिक्वायर्ड होती हैं, जैसे कि ये जेनाइटल सर्जरी, अगर बॉटम सर्जरी जिसको बोलते हैं, बॉटम सर्जरी के लिए अगर मेल टू फीमेल है तो वेजिनोप्लास्टी कराने पड़ेगी। अगर वेजिनोप्लास्टी के लिए पैसे नहीं है, क्योंकि सर्जरी अभी भी प्राइवेट में अच्छे ऑप्शन है, सरकारी हॉस्पिटलों में अभी भी उतने अच्छे एक्सपर्ट नहीं है या उतनी अच्छी केयर नहीं होती, उतने अच्छे रिजल्ट नहीं आते हैं, लोग काफी प्रॉब्लम फेस करते हैं। इवन मैंने पिछले 1 साल से एम्स के साथ काम किया है, वहां भी रिकवरी में बहुत सारी प्रॉब्लम्स आती हैं। तो मैं किसी को, जब बॉटम सर्जरी की बात आती है तो मैं किसी को ऐसे रिकमेंड नहीं करती। हो सकता है आप टाइम बढ़ जाने दो, नहीं पैसे हैं तो मत कराओ, मगर कहीं ऐसी जगह नहीं करानी है जहां पर ही आपको फिर आगे चल के प्रॉब्लम्स हो। तो फिर सेकेंडरी सर्जरी में जो आते हैं वो है फेस फेमिनाइजेशन, राइनोप्लास्टी, बी शेपिंग, फोरहेड करेक्शन, आईब्रो चिक अगमेंटेशन, चिन करेक्शन, ब्रेस्ट एगमेंटेशन, वॉइस फेमिनाइजेशन सर्जरी, ट्रेकियल शेप, लेजर हेयर रिमूवल, हेयर ट्रांसप्लांट। इसके अलावा जैसे मैडम ने कहा कि अभी ब्रॉड शोल्डर को कम करने की भी आ गई है। बहुत सारी ट्रांस में एक और जेंडर मार्कर बहुत तगड़ा होता है जिसको उन्हें डिस्फोरिया होता है, वो है हाइट को लेके। मोस्टली ट्रांस वुमेन की हाइट जो है 6 फीट से भी ज्यादा होती है काफी लोगों की, तो वो भी एक बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज रहता है। तो उसके लिए भी शायद हाइट रिडक्शन के लिए भी कुछ होता है। और फिर फीमेल टू मेल के लिए वो कॉमन सर्जरी वो कुछ इस तरह से है। इसमें फैलोप्लास्टी मैडम ने समझाया था, मेटोटोप्लास्टी, अगर कोई, और ये दोनों बहुत ही, मैं तो, क्योंकि मैंने बहुत एक्सपीरियंस है, मैं कम से कम 20-25 लोगों को रिकवरी अपने घर पे करा चुकी हूँ, तो मैं किसी को सजेस्ट नहीं करती हूँ फैलोप्लास्टी इतनी इजीली, क्योंकि फैलोप्लास्टी सबसे ज्यादा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड सर्जरी है अब तक की ट्रांसजेंडर्स की जो मैंने देखा है। मैंने बहुत सारे बच्चों के फेल्योर रिजल्ट देखे हैं, और फेल्योर जब होते हैं केस तो इमोशनली, फिजिकली, मेंटली सब तरीके से बच्चा टूट जाता है, क्योंकि 5-6 लाख रुपए लग चुके होते हैं। आपका जो जहां से फैलो लेते हैं वहां से स्किन लॉस ऐसा होता है कि वो रिकवर नहीं हो सकता, दोबारा कोई ऑप्शन नहीं बचता है कि आप कोई और ऑप्शन अपना सकें। तो वो बहुत ही टफ सिचुएशन होती है। तो फैलोप्लास्टी अगर कोई भी प्लान करता है तो वो जब तक अपनी आंखों से उस डॉक्टर के रिजल्ट ना देख ले तो उसको नहीं जाना चाहिए। मेटोटोप्लास्टी बेस्ट ऑप्शन है। और अगर ये दोनों भी नहीं करना है तो खाली आप हेरेक्स्टोटोमी करा के बस आप ऐसे भी रह सकते हैं। नेक्स्ट, कॉमन चैलेंज फेस बाय द ट्रांस कम्युनिटी ड्यूरिंग द गेटिंग मेडिकल एक्सेस। तो सबसे ज्यादा दिक्कत सर्जरी के अलावा जो मेडिकल ट्रांजिशनिंग है उसके अलावा भी अगर आपको जो बेसिक इलनेस है अगर किसी ट्रांस पर्सन को, तो आज भी बहुत सारे डॉक्टर्स, बहुत सारे मेडिकल इंस्टीट्यूशन ऐसे हैं जहां पर ही हमको अभी भी बुखार की दवाई के लिए या कोई और हमें बीमारी है तो उसके लिए भी हमें कहीं कहीं चैलेंजेस फेस करने पड़ते हैं, जैसे लैक ऑफ डॉक्टर नॉलेज ऑन HRT सर्जरी, ट्रांस हेल्थ के बारे में लोगों को पढ़ाया ही नहीं जाता, बताया ही नहीं जाता। या जो गवर्नमेंट हॉस्पिटल है स्पेशली जो गांव में है या जो छोटे कस्बों में है वहां पर ही बिल्कुल कोई भी इंसान, और जो कि सबसे ज्यादा, क्योंकि पहला स्टेप ट्रांजिशनिंग का वो काउंसलिंग है। काउंसलिंग जो है उसके लिए ज्यादा बड़े एक्सपर्ट की जरूरत नहीं है, उसके लिए बड़े सिटी में भी आने की जरूरत नहीं, काउंसलिंग तो कहीं से भी की जा सकती है। HRT एक बहुत सिंपल प्रोसेस है, उसमें भी आप छोटे जगह से भी की जा सकती है, गवर्नमेंट हॉस्पिटल में भी मेडिसिन प्रोवाइड की जा सकती है, बट ये चीजें नहीं है इनके लिए। इसकी वजह से किसी के पास पैसे नहीं है, प्राइवेट में जब जाते हैं तो डॉक्टर्स की फीस बहुत ज्यादा है। सरकारी में एक तो ऑप्शन नहीं है, जहां है भी तो वो इतने चक्कर लगवा देते हैं, 1-2 साल लगा देते हैं GID सर्टिफिकेट देने में। फिर डिस्क्रिमिनेशन, मिसजेंडरिंग, इनसेंसिटिव बिहेवियर ऑफ द स्टाफ, कहीं स्टाफ भी कहीं कहीं अगर ट्रांसजेंडर्स अगर हॉस्पिटल में जाते हैं तो स्टाफ भी मिसबिहेव कर देते हैं। लोगों को डर रहता है एंड ह्यूमलाइजेशन होने का एट हॉस्पिटल में, काफी लोग डरते हैं हॉस्पिटल जाने से, क्योंकि कहीं ना कहीं उनके साथ बदतमीजी होती है या उनको उतनी रिस्पेक्ट और इज्जत के साथ ट्रीटमेंट नहीं दिया जाता है, तो इसलिए लोग डरते हैं जाने से हॉस्पिटल। वेरी फ्यू हॉस्पिटल ऑफरिंग जेंडर अफॉर्मेटिव सर्विस, बहुत ही कम ही हॉस्पिटल हैं जो ये सर्विसेज ऑफर करते हैं। मैंने पहले भी बोला ओनली बड़े शहर हैं वहां पर ये ऑप्शन अवेलेबल है, छोटे शहरों में या गवर्नमेंट हॉस्पिटल में वेरी लिमिटेड सोर्स हैं। नो इंश्योरेंस एंड फाइनेंशियल सपोर्ट फॉर ट्रांजिशनिंग रिलेटेड केयर। जैसे ट्रांजिशनिंग बहुत ही कॉस्टली है, टाइम टेकिंग है, रिस्की भी है और सबकी जरूरत है, बट इंश्योरेंस में कवर नहीं होती। इसकी वजह से बहुत सारे इंडिविजुअल्स हैं जो ट्रांजिशनिंग नहीं करा पाते हैं क्योंकि उनके पास पैसे नहीं होते, उनके पास रहने की जगह नहीं होती है, उनको कोई सपोर्ट करने वाला नहीं होता है, तो उसकी वजह से अभी भी बहुत सारे ट्रांसजेंडर्स लोग ऐसे हैं जो अपनी सर्जरी नहीं करा पाते हैं क्योंकि सरकारी में ऑप्शन नहीं है, प्राइवेट में वो अफोर्ड नहीं कर सकते। तो मैंने इसके लिए पिटीशन भी फाइल की थी सुप्रीम कोर्ट में कि जो जेंडर एफॉर्मेटिव सर्जरी है ये प्लास्टिक सर्जरी या कॉस्मेटिक सर्जरी से बाहर होनी चाहिए, ये एक ट्रांसजेंडर्स लोगों की बेसिक नीड है, तो इसलिए इसको इंश्योरेंस में कवर्ड होना चाहिए। सो डैट गवर्नमेंट ने इसके लिए आयुष्मान भारत कार्ड अनाउंस किया था, बट अभी भी वो इम्प्लीमेंटेड नहीं हुआ है फॉर ट्रांसजेंडर्स के लिए। आइडेंटिटी मिसमैच इन डॉक्यूमेंट, क्योंकि डॉक्यूमेंट में उनके नाम जो है, जो बायोलॉजिकल नेम है या डेड नेम जिसको बोलते हैं वो रहता है, तो बहुत सारे लोग उसकी वजह से भी हॉस्पिटल में जाने से बचते हैं क्योंकि हॉस्पिटल वाले उनके डॉक्यूमेंट मांगते हैं। पोस्ट ऑपरेशन केयर एंड फॉलो अप सिस्टम बहुत ज्यादा पुअर है, इवन प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल भी सर्जरी के बाद उतनी सपोर्ट नहीं करते हैं। मैंने बहुत सारे बच्चों को देखा है जिनकी दिक्कत होती है, खास करके छोटी छोटी प्रॉब्लम्स होती है, उसके लिए कहेंगे आप हॉस्पिटल आ जाओ, जब सिटी से आप बाहर हो तो हॉस्पिटल जाना इतना आसान नहीं होता है। नो ट्रांसजेंडर हेल्थ ट्रेनिंग इन द मेडिकल करिकुलम, जो मेडिकल स्टूडेंट हैं उनके लिए भी बहुत कुछ इसके बारे में ना तो पढ़ाया जाता है ना प्रैक्टिकल नॉलेज दी जाती है। तो ये चैलेंजेज हैं जो ब्रॉडली हैं, बट इसके अलावा भी जो 3 मेजर चैलेंज हैं वो है मेडिकल। नेक्स्ट, मेंटल हेल्थ चैलेंजेस। मेंटल हेल्थ चाहे वो बिफोर ट्रांजिशनिंग हो या आफ्टर ट्रांजिशनिंग हो, मेंटल हेल्थ बहुत ही ज़्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट रोल प्ले करती है ट्रांसजेंडर्स की लाइफ में, क्योंकि हम कहीं ना कहीं चाहो ट्रांजिशनिंग से पहले या ट्रांजिशनिंग के बाद हमारे को ये मेंटल डिप्रेशन, मेंटल एंजाइटी, सुसाइड थॉट ये सब आते ही हैं, वो डिफरेंट वजह से। जब आप ट्रांजिशनिंग से पहले होते हैं तो डिस्फोरिया की वजह से आपको प्रॉब्लम्स होती हैं, जिसकी वजह से आपको डिप्रेशन होता है, एंजाइटी होती है, सेल्फ हार्म करने के भी आते हैं, कभी कभी आपको सुसाइडल थॉट आते हैं। कितने लोग अभी भी सुसाइड कर लेते हैं, अपनी चीज़ों को कंट्रोल नहीं कर पाते हैं, अपने इमोशन को। और अनफॉर्चुनेटली हमारे देश में बहुत ही कम ही हेल्थ प्रोफेशनल हैं जो इस चीज़ को एज ए ट्रांस एफॉर्मेटिव केयर की तरह ट्रीट करते हैं। नहीं तो मोस्टली तो डॉक्टर्स जो हैं अभी भी यही कहते हैं करेक्ट कर देंगे हम जेंडर आइडेंटिटी, जो कि नॉट पॉसिबल है, वो हो ही नहीं सकता। मैंने सारा कुछ कर लिया था अपने जेंडर को ठीक करने के लिए, बट मैं 1% भी अपनी फीलिंग्स पे कंट्रोल नहीं कर पाई। तो उसकी वजह से इवन डॉक्टर्स भी ऐसे बोलते हैं, यू विल ग्रो आउट ऑफ इट, दिस इज जस्ट ए फेज, आपका फेज है, चला जाएगा, गेट मैरिड, एवरीथिंग विल फाइन, दिस इज द अगेंस्ट आवर कल्चर। ये कुछ डॉक्टर्स भी इस तरह से बातें करते हैं जो जेंडर कन्वर्जन थेरेपी में आता है। वो पेरेंट्स को इस सब बातों से उल्टे सीधी चीजें बोलते रहते हैं। और बच्चों को, मैंने ये केस देखा है जम्मू कश्मीर का था कि उसके पेरेंट्स इवन मेडिकल प्रोफेशन में थे और उन्होंने अपने बच्चे की सारे ट्रीटमेंट करा डाले, एंड में उसका ब्रेन का ऑपरेशन तक करा दिया, और उसको ये कुछ भी नहीं हो सकता। फिर जब बच्चे को ब्रेन का जब ऑपरेशन करा दिया तब उसने जाके घर छोड़ा और तब जाके उसने अपनी ट्रांजिशनिंग करी और अभी वो चंडीगढ़ में रहती है। तो यहाँ तक कि लोग करते हैं। पोस्ट में ट्रांजिशनिंग में जो मेंटल हेल्थ इशू आते हैं वो हैं पीपल एक्सपीरियंस बॉडी इमेज इशू। आपको अपनी हमेशा सोसाइटी में आपको उस रिस्पेक्टिव नज़र से नहीं देखा जाता है, तो आपकी एक इमेज खराब होती है। तो इमेज वाला भी इशू आपको मेंटल हेल्थ इफेक्ट डालता है। लोनलीनेस, अधिकतर लोग अपने आप को अकेला फील करते हैं क्योंकि बहुत ही कम लोग हैं जिनके पार्टनर्स होते हैं या जिनकी शादी होती है ना। मोस्ट ऑफ द लोगों की तो शादी होती नहीं है, क्योंकि लोग इनिशियली आपको प्यार करते हैं, आपका साथ देते हैं, बट एंड ऑफ डे वो फैमिली का बहाना करके आपको छोड़ ही देते हैं। तो ये भी एक मेंटल हेल्थ का रीजन बनता है। फियर ऑफ रिजेक्शन, सबको कहीं ना कहीं हमेशा डर बना रहता है कि मुझे रिजेक्ट कर देंगे मेरे जेंडर के बेस पे। आइडेंटिटी क्राइसिस रहती है कि हमेशा एक डर सब ट्रांस के अंदर रहता है जो बाइनरी का हिस्सा बनना चाहते हैं। जैसे कि लोग मुझे पहचान ना लें कि मैं ट्रांस मैन हूँ या ट्रांस वुमेन हूँ, तो ये भी एक रीजन है जो मेंटल हेल्थ को क्रिएट आपको बढ़ाते हैं। नेक्स्ट, चैलेंजेस फेस ड्यूरिंग द एचआरटी के दौरान भी बहुत सारी दिक्कतें आती हैं, जिसको बारे में स्पेशली मेडिकल प्रोफेशनल्स को समझना चाहिए, खासकर आप लोगों को, कि जब कोई मेल टू फीमेल एचआरटी पे होता है तो उसके अंदर बहुत सारे बॉडी में पॉजिटिव चेंजेस भी आते हैं, जैसे कि फैट डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन होता है, सॉफ्ट स्किन होने लगती है, रिड्यूस मसल मास एंड हेल्प अलाइन द बॉडी विद द आइडेंटिटी। लड़कियों की तरह बॉडी उसकी धीरे धीरे होने लगती है। तो ये जब चेंजेस आते हैं तो समटाइम्स बच्चे को समझ में नहीं आता है कि मेरी बॉडी में ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है। जैसे उसको रोना ज्यादा आने लगता है, तो उसको कभी कभी लगता है कि मेरे को ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है, मैं रो क्यों रहा हूँ, मेरे आंसू ज्यादा आने लगते हैं। तो एंजाइटी, तो ये सब चीजें पॉजिटिव्स हैं, तो हमें पता होगा तभी हम उसको गाइड कर सकते हैं कि नहीं, ये सब कुछ नॉर्मल है, ये ऐसा होता है। और इन सब चीजों के लिए भी कुछ दिक्कतें भी आती हैं, जैसे कि ब्लड क्लॉटिंग हो सकती है, माइग्रेशन होता है, ब्रेस्ट में टेंडरनेस होती है, रिड्यूस बॉन डेंसिटी एक कॉमन। अगर आप लंबे तरह से, खासकर ट्रांस वुमेन में, अगर आप प्रॉपर एचआरटी नहीं लेते हैं और आप किसी डॉक्टर्स के कंसल्टेंट में आप नहीं, अगर आप अपनी एचआरटी कर रहे हैं आफ्टर इवन सर्जरी, तो आपकी बोन डेंसिटी रिड्यूस होने लगती है, मूड स्विंगिंग होते हैं, सेक्सुअल डिसफंक्शन होता है। तो ये सब दिक्कतें हैं, ये सब प्रॉब्लम्स हैं एचआरटी की। इसी तरह से अगर फीमेल टू मेल देखें तो बॉयज पॉजिटिव चीजें जो होती हैं, बॉयज चेंज होने लगती है, उनकी वॉइस भारी होने लगेगी, बिल्ड द मसल्स मास बढ़ने लगेगा, स्टॉप मेंस्ट्रुएशन पीरियड खत्म बंद हो जाते हैं, एंड इंक्रीजिंग द फेशियल हेयर एंड बॉडी हेयर बढ़ने लगते हैं। तो ये पॉजिटिव साइंस है, बट इसके अलावा भी कुछ उनको प्रॉब्लम्स भी फेस करने पड़ सकती हैं, जैसे एंकर बहुत चेहरे पे पिंपल्स हो सकते हैं, लीवर एंड स्ट्रेस, एग्रेसिव मूड स्विंग होते हैं, इमोशनल नंबर्स। तो इस चीजों के बारे में हमें पता होना चाहिए, सो डैट कि हम अपने पेशेंट को प्रॉपर गाइड कर सकें। एक्सटर्नल मेडिकल, और कभी कभी क्या है कि इन सब चीजों से बचने के लिए बच्चे क्या करते हैं कि सेल्फ मेडिकेशन करने लगते हैं, जब वो आप मेडिकल फैसिलिटी को अवेल नहीं कर सकते, या डॉक्टर्स को साथ कंफर्टेबल नहीं है, या मेडिकल ऑप्शन पे जाने के लिए, तो वो सेल्फ मेडिकेशन करने लगते हैं, जो कि बहुत ही ज्यादा डेंजरस है, क्योंकि ये जो दवाइयां हैं ये सिर्फ आपकी बॉडी में पॉजिटिव चीजें भी नहीं लाती हैं, नेगेटिव चीजें भी बहुत लाती हैं, और ये कहीं ना कहीं आपके लीवर और किडनी पे भी इम्पेक्ट डाल सकती हैं। तो सेल्फ मेडिकेशन तो मैं बिल्कुल ही नहीं रिकमेंड करती हूँ, और जो भी लोग करते हैं, खासकर जो सोशल कल्चर्ड ग्रुप हैं, वो एक दूसरे के कहने पे दवाइयाँ यूज करने लगते हैं, जैसे कि वो जो आजकल स्किन को वाइट करने के लिए इंजेक्शन लगवाते हैं, तो वो इंजेक्शन बिना जाने समझे, और कुछ ऐसे जो डॉक्टर्स होते हैं, जो जो उनको मैं पता नहीं, मैं क्या वर्ड बोलूं, जो डॉक्टर्स एमबीबीएस या जो डिग्री वाले डॉक्टर नहीं है, नॉन डिग्री डॉक्टर्स होते हैं, वो इन सब चीजों को बहुत ही इजीली तरीके से लोगों को मिसगाइड करते हैं या यूज कराते हैं। तो इन सब चीजों के बारे में भी लोगों को अवेयरनेस लाने की जरूरत है। फिर सर्जरी में जो प्रॉब्लम्स आती हैं, नेक्स्ट, और ट्रांस वुमेन हमारे लिए सबसे बड़ी जो सर्जरी है वो बॉटम सर्जरी है। बॉटम सर्जरी में भी अगर कोई सिग्मॉइड कॉलन वैजिनोप्लास्टी करता है तो उसको 1 महीने तक तो उसको लिक्विड डाइट पे रखा जाता है, कि जिसमें आपको खाने को ही नहीं कुछ दिया जाता है, क्योंकि आपकी इंटेस्टाइन का भी कट किया जाता है, तो उसकी वजह से आपको बहुत प्रिकॉशन पे रखा जाता है। तो उसकी वजह से वीकनेस बहुत आ जाती है बॉडी में। तो पोस्ट सर्जरी रिकवरी में बहुत ज्यादा इमोशनली और साइकोलॉजिकली हेल्प की जरूरत पड़ती है, और रेगुलर डायलेशन की जरूरत पड़ती है, और ड्रेसिंग की जरूरत पड़ती है, और इन्फेक्शन होने के बहुत चांस रहते हैं। इन्फेक्शन काफी लोगों को हो जाता है, फिर उस इन्फेक्शन से बचने के लिए बहुत दिक्कतें आती हैं। तो इन सब चीजों को बचाने के लिए हमें अवेयरनेस लानी चाहिए, हमें काम करना चाहिए, समझना चाहिए। और ट्रांसमैन के केस में, जैसे कि कुछ ट्रांसमैन ऐसे हैं, जैसे फिजिकली तो वो लड़का दिख रहे हैं, बट कहीं ना कहीं अगर उन्हें कोई प्रॉब्लम्स रिलेटेड टू फीमेल हो गई तो वो कभी कभी अनकंफर्टेबल होते हैं। तो हमारे जो गायनोकोलॉजिस्ट टीम है या जो स्टूडेंट हैं या जो डॉक्टर्स हैं जो प्रैक्टिस में है गायनोकोलॉजी, उनको समझना चाहिए कि वो इतना अपनी टीम को कंफर्टेबल करें कि कोई ट्रांसमैन आके भी अपनी प्रॉब्लम्स वहां शेयर कर सके और वहां बता सके कि उसको पीसीओडी भी हो सकती है, उसको और भी कोई इन्फेक्शन हो सकता है। तो इन सब चीज ये ट्रांसमैन को बहुत ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम्स फेस करने पड़ती हैं। और जैसे फैलोप्लास्टी बहुत ही टफ सर्जरी है, मैं किसी को इतनी जल्दी रिकमेंड नहीं करती कि भाई फैलोप्लास्टी करानी चाहिए। फैलोप्लास्टी बहुत ही ट्रेंड और बहुत ही वेल फैसिलिटी वाले हॉस्पिटल में करानी चाहिए, नहीं तो फैलोप्लास्टी, क्योंकि इसके फेलियर रेट बहुत ज्यादा है। बाकी सर्जरियों के फेलियर रेट बहुत कम है, मैं तो कहूँगी 1% से भी कम हो सकते हैं, बट फैलोप्लास्टिक के तो बहुत ज्यादा है। हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस नहीं होता है, इसकी वजह से लोग अच्छी फैसिलिटी प्राइवेट में ले नहीं पाते हैं। नेक्स्ट, सो व्हाट वी कैन डू, अगर हम ये सब दिक्कतों के लिए हम बहुत कुछ करने की जरूरत नहीं है, बस इंटीग्रेटेड ट्रांसजेंडर हेल्थ केयर मेडिकल साइकोलॉजिकल एजुकेशन में हमें करना चाहिए। मेक इट मैंडेटरी नॉट ऑप्शनल। अभी भी लोगों के लिए ऑप्शनल है इसके बारे में, बट ये कहीं ना कहीं हमारे एजुकेशन सिस्टम में ये कंपलसरी होना चाहिए। इंश्योर ऑल पब्लिक हॉस्पिटल हैव द ट्रेंड स्टाफ एंड प्रोटोकॉल फॉर HRT सर्जरी एंड मेंटल हेल्थ सपोर्ट इंक्लूडिंग जेंडर अफॉर्मेटिव केयर इन ऑल नेशनल हेल्थ स्कीम। खासकर जो नेशनल डेवलपमेंट हेल्थ से रिलेटेड स्कीम होती है गवर्नमेंट की, उसमें भी जेंडर से रिलेटेड और HRT से रिलेटेड और काउंसलिंग से रिलेटेड चीजें तो कवर की जा सकती हैं। सर्जरी नहीं करा जा सकती, बट 2 स्टेप तो कर सकते हैं कम से कम। अगर काउंसलिंग अगर गवर्नमेंट हॉस्पिटल प्रोवाइड करने लगे अगर अपने सारे जगह, तब भी बहुत हेल्प हो जाएगी, स्पेशली फॉर द पेरेंट्स, क्योंकि पेरेंट्स डॉक्टर्स के चीजों को जल्दी कन्वेंस करते हैं। अगर मैं किसी की पेरेंट्स की काउंसलिंग करूं तो मेरी बात इतनी जल्दी से नहीं मानते हैं जितनी डॉक्टर्स की मानते हैं। अगर डॉक्टर ही कन्वर्जन थेरेपी करता है तो बहुत दिक्कत आती है, क्योंकि पेरेंट्स तो उसी पॉइंट से आते हैं कि बस उनका तो यही कि किसी तरह से डॉक्टर कह दे कि ये ठीक है और हम ठीक कर देंगे। inclusive gender affirmative care in all national and discrimination self identification lets people legally identify without unnecessary medication और bureaucratic instructions। हमें लोगों को सपोर्ट करना चाहिए उनकी जेंडर आइडेंटिटी को अपने अकॉर्डिंग चूज करने में, क्योंकि कहीं ना कभी कभी बहुत सारे हम एग्जामिन करने लगते हैं या बहुत सारे डॉक्यूमेंटल में ब्यूरोक्रेट लोग बहुत तंग करते हैं डॉक्यूमेंट चेंज करने में, तो उसमें भी थोड़ी सी हेल्प करनी चाहिए। मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट इन्वॉल्व ट्रांसजेंडर पर्सन इन एवरी डिसीजन दैट इफेक्ट द टीम हेल्थ केयर एजुकेशन लॉ एंड वेलफेयर, सब में इन्वॉल्वमेंट करना चाहिए। चेंज इन नॉट कम फ्रॉम द सिंपैथी। जनरली लोग हमारी बातें सुन के हमसे मिलके हमारे प्रति सिंपैथी फील कराते हैं, सिंपैथी नहीं, सिस्टमेटिक रिफॉर्म चाहिए। कम बाई द नेक्स्ट, मेडिकल स्टूडेंट नीड टू अडॉप्ट। जो मेडिकल के स्टूडेंट हैं उनको कुछ चीजें करनी चाहिए, जैसे नीड टू एजुकेट देम बियॉन्ड द टेक्स्ट बुक। अगर टेक्स्ट बुक में नहीं भी है तब भी इसके बारे में थोड़ी सी एजुकेशन लेनी चाहिए। ड्यूटी टू प्रोवाइड नॉन जजमेंटल एविडेंस बेस्ड केयर। एडवोकेसी फॉर इंक्लूसिव ऑफ ट्रांस हेल्थ केयर इन करिकुलम। अगर करिकुलम में या आपकी स्टडी में अगर ट्रांसजेंडर से रिलेटेड केस नहीं है या उनसे रिलेटेड नहीं है तो उसके लिए भी आपको डिमांड करनी चाहिए कि ये चीजें होनी चाहिए, या आपका रिसर्च टॉपिक में ट्रांसजेंडर से रिलेटेड रिसर्च हो सकती है हमसे क्योंकि हमारे को लेके अभी भी बहुत सारे डॉक्टर्स बहुत सारा डाटा अवेलेबल नहीं है कि कुछ चीजें कुछ ट्रीटमेंट रिलेटेड टू जेंडर्स होते हैं कि फीमेल के सर्टेन पैरामीटर्स होते हैं, मेल के सर्टेन पैरामीटर्स होते हैं। तो अगर ट्रांस वुमेन है तो उसके लिए कभी कभी डॉक्टर कंफ्यूज रहते हैं कि उसको फीमेल वाले पैरामीटर्स लागू कर पे मापना है या मेल वाले पे करना है, तो इन सब पे भी R&D करने की जरूरत है। वी शुड बी द ट्रांस अलाइ। हम ट्रांस के प्रति अलाइ तो हो ही सकते हैं अगर कुछ नहीं है तो। नेक्स्ट, डोंट डू। कन्वर्जन थेरेपी कभी नहीं करनी चाहिए। फिजिकल एग्जामिन ऑफ प्राइवेट पार्ट एक्सेप्ट सर्जन, सर्जन के अलावा किसी भी डॉक्टर, किसी भी प्रोफेशनल को किसी भी ट्रांसजेंडर्स के फिजिकल पार्ट एग्जामिन करने की जरूरत नहीं होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि जो इंटरसेक्स बच्चे हैं उन्हीं के फिजिकल पार्ट्स में एबनॉर्मलिटी हो सकती है। बाकी ट्रांसजेंडर एज ए बायोलॉजी के हम स्टूडेंट हैं, तो हमें तो पता ही है कि बायोलॉजिकली तो कोई प्रॉब्लम्स है ही नहीं, सारी प्रॉब्लम माइंड से है, सारी प्रॉब्लम एक्सेप्टेंस, आइडेंटिटी और सोल की है। तो यहाँ पर ही फिजिकल एग्जामिन की तो जरूरत ही नहीं पड़ती है। बट मैंने देखा है कुछ इवन जीआईडी और काउंसलिंग के दौरान भी कभी कभी डॉक्टर्स जो है फिजिकल एग्जामिन करने लगते हैं। मिस जेंडरिंग नहीं करनी चाहिए और डेड नेम नहीं यूज करना चाहिए, क्योंकि डेड नेम्स कभी कभी लोगों के लिए ट्रिगर का काम करता है, उनको स्ट्रेस हो सकता है। डिस्क्रिमिनेशन बेस्ड ऑन जेंडर एंड लुक के बेस पे नहीं करना चाहिए आप अपनी प्रैक्टिस में। डोंट आस्क इररिलेवेंट क्वेश्चन, कभी कभी डॉक्टर्स लोग ऐसे क्वेश्चन पूछते हैं जो नहीं पूछने चाहिए, वो बहुत पर्सनल होते हैं या बहुत फनी होते हैं। खासकर सेक्सुअलिटी को लेके काफी क्वेश्चन ऐसे पूछे जाते हैं जो कि ट्रीटमेंट में उनकी कहीं जरूरत नहीं होती है। अगर कोई बायोलॉजिकली ठीक है तो उसकी फिर वो चीजें तो वो अंडरस्टूड है कि वो ठीक ही होंगी, तो वो पूछने की क्या जरूरत है। नेक्स्ट। जाते जाते मैं कुछ क्वेश्चन छोड़ते जा रही हूँ कि ये चीजें एज ए बीइंग ए ह्यूमन बीइंग, बीइंग ए इंडियन सिटीजन, हमें अपने आप से ये क्वेश्चन करने चाहिए कि आज भी इन इतने सारे रिफॉर्म, लीगल रिफॉर्म आ गए, मेडिकल इंस्टीट्यूशन में ट्रांसजेंडर के लिए हेल्थ केयर पे बात हो रही है, उनके करिकुलम में भी कंसिडर किया गया, फिर भी कहीं ना कहीं हम डे बाई डे बहुत सारी प्रॉब्लम्स फेस करते हैं। नेक्स्ट। Thank you for your patience. Next. और everything possible with patience. अगर आप अपनी ट्रांजिशनिंग को अवॉइड करते हैं और डॉक्टर सपोर्ट करते हैं तो कुछ भी पॉसिबल है। मैंने अपनी ट्रांजिशनिंग 35 ईयर की एज में की थी, और जनरली ये भी एक मिथ रहता है ट्रांजिशनिंग से रिलेटेड की एज को लेके, तो एज भी कोई ज़्यादा मैटर नहीं करती है। हाँ, अगर आप एक यंग एज पे ट्रांजिशनिंग स्टार्ट करते हैं तो बहुत सारी आपकी बॉडी क्योंकि फ्लेक्सिबल होती है, आपकी बोन स्ट्रक्चर तब तक इतना स्ट्रांग नहीं होता है, तो वो इजीली चेंज हो जाता है। बट जब आपकी एज ज़्यादा हो जाती है तो आपकी बोन चेंज नहीं हो सकती है, आपका फैट रिसेफलिंग हो सकता है। तो ये एक चैलेंज है। अदरवाइज आप किसी भी एज पे ट्रांजिशनिंग कर सकते हैं। जब मैं इतने एक स्ट्रांग पर्सनालिटी थी मेरी, और मैंने पूरी कोशिश की थी अपने मेल जेंडर को जस्टिफाई करने की और अपने अंदर मेल फीलिंग्स को डालने के लिए, कि मैंने जिम भी ज्वाइन किया था, बाई एप्स भी बनाए थे कि मेरी फीलिंग चेंज हो जाए, और मैं बाहर से लुक में मैं बिल्कुल परफेक्ट लड़का दिखती थी, बट अंदर से एक परफेक्ट लड़की थी। और जब मैंने अपनी ट्रांजिशनिंग की तो अभी भी मैं पहले भी उस जेंडर को जस्टिफाई करती थी, अभी भी इस जेंडर को जस्टिफाइड करती हूँ, क्योंकि मैं बाइनरी का हिस्सा हूँ। मैं पहले भी मेल थी, अभी मैं फीमेल हूँ। तो आप ट्रांसजेंडर्स बाइनरी भी हो सकते हैं। ट्रांसजेंडर सिर्फ हिजड़ा और किन्नर ही नहीं होते हैं, ट्रांसजेंडर बाइनरी भी सिस्टम का हिस्सा हो सकते हैं, एक फीमेल ट्रांस वुमेन या ट्रांसमैन भी हो सकते हैं। नेक्स्ट। ये मेरी कुछ और पिक्चर्स हैं। तो और मैंने अभी तक जो अपनी ट्रांजिशन जर्नी में जो मैंने पर्सनली जो सर्जरी फेस की है, वो मैंने बॉटम सर्जरी सिग्मोइड वेजिनोप्लास्टी कराई है, और मैंने बॉयज सर्जरी के लिए ये ट्रेकियल बॉयज फेमिनाइजेशन सर्जरी कराई है, और बी शेप कराई है मैंने अपना, और ब्रेस्ट इम्प्लांट कराए हैं। तो इतनी सर्जरी मैंने कराई है। तो इनसे रिलेटेड अगर किसी को कोई क्वेश्चन है तो मेरे से पूछ सकते हैं। थैंक यू सो मच।
Thank you so much, Kamlesh, for sharing your personal experience and passion for helping other trans people navigate their surgery. Your work is truly transformative and by providing compassionate and empowering presence for those going through the process of gender affirming surgery. And thank you all so much for your time today. We hope this session has provided you with valuable insights into the medical, surgical, and compassionate care aspects of gender reconstruction surgery, particularly from the perspective of OBGYNs. As we wrap up, remember that gender affirming care is all about creating space for individuals to live authentically, and with dignity. As medical students, we have a unique opportunity to support that journey. And I hope you feel ready to take what you've learned today and apply it in your practice. And thank you again for attending today's session. And we look forward to seeing you at future events. And the feedback form has been posted in the chat box. Please fill it to receive your certificates.
मेरे को बस जाते जाते इतना बोलना था कि थैंक यू सो मच, आपने इस टॉपिक को कंसिडर किया। ट्रांस कम्युनिटी एक बहुत ही मार्जिनाइज कम्युनिटी है हमारी कंट्री में, और उस टॉपिक को स्पेशली जो मेडिकल प्रोफेशनल है या मेडिकल स्टूडेंट हैं इस चीज को समझ रहे हैं, जानने कोशिश कर रहे हैं जानने की, तो वो आगे चल के जहाँ भी जाएंगे इन फ्यूचर, जिस भी फील्ड में जाएंगे, तो वो जरूर हमारे लिए सेंसिटिव होंगे। आने वाले इन फ्यूचर जो आज प्रॉब्लम ट्रांसजेंडर कम्युनिटी फेस कर रही है, आने वाले टाइम में वो नहीं फेस करेगी। तो ऐसा ही मेरा मानना है इसी नोट्स के साथ। और एक चीज जाते जाते ये और कहना चाहूंगी कि प्राइड मंथ एक इवेंट की तरह नहीं होना चाहिए कि प्राइड मंथ है तो हम ट्रांस के प्रति सेंसिटिव हो गए, एक सेलिब्रेट जस्ट लाइक नवरात्रि चल रहे हैं तो भाई सेलिब्रेट कर लिया ना। तो ये 12 महीने रहना चाहिए हम सेंसिटिव ट्रांस कम्युनिटी को लेके, सिर्फ ये नहीं कि प्राइड मंथ है तो हम सेंसिटिव हो गए बाकी दिनों में। तो इसको एज ए इवेंट नहीं, इसको हम इंक्लूसिव अपना हिस्सा या उनके प्रति भी उतना ही सेंसिटिव और प्यार और रिस्पेक्ट करना चाहिए। थैंक यू सो मच।
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Kamlesh.
so much,
और
Kamlesh.
आपने जो एफर्ट लिया है हमें एजुकेट करने के लिए, that is also very important in shaping us as medical professionals who are sensitive to this. So thank you so much.
वेलकम।
All right, participants, there is a post-event form in the chat box. It has been uploaded. You may go ahead and fill it.